place called Paro Industria. If you drive along the N2 and then turn left, it's about 20 minutes from Cape Town. I suppose it can be described as an unfashionable suburb, and yet here I am in the office of the world's 367th richest man and the richest man in South Africa. Apparently this gentleman is worth around $7 billion US. That's according to Forbes magazine. Whether that's true, I don't know. But anyway, you get the picture. This gentleman could be in a penthouse office in the centre of Cape Town, looking over all the beautiful beaches of Camps Bay and Table Mountain, and even see to the winelands where he owns a wine estate called Lawrenceford, but he chooses not to. Christo Wiese, why do you stay in Paro Industria?
Well, I believe that if one is involved in business, you've got to try and operate within an area where there's an atmosphere of business. I have at times thought that I would like to have my personal offices on the estate, for instance, in Lawrenceford. But a friend of mine pointed out that then when I get to the office in the morning, I'll worry about whether the lawn had been cut properly or whether the flowers in the bed outside my office are okay. You've got to be in a business environment. That's one aspect. The other is, purely an accident of history. We bought a company that owned this huge building in Paro. I made my office here, and it just stayed that way.
Is it also to do with the fact, there's another family not far from here that made its money, a good chunk of its money anyway, from luxury goods and serving the upper end of the market. You have served traditionally, and served them well, the lower to lower middle class end of the market. Do you feel that this grounds you and makes you closer to the people that you actually serve?
It certainly does have that benefit as well. In fact, I have a friend who is a very well-known politician who always delights in telling people, Christo has his offices in a township, because right across the road from where our building is a township.
And you still drive your car here?
Absolutely, and did it throughout the turbulent years in 1985, 1986, when there were lots of street protests, burning tires and things. People would phone me from abroad and say, but do you still go to your office? I said, I haven't noticed anything. I come here early in the morning, drive home late at night. It has never affected me.
What is it about Stellenbosch, Christo? Because there are so many people that I interview in my job every couple of weeks. Someone from Stellenbosch has done something extraordinary. They're right at the top of the business strata, who I'm talking about. But what is it about Stellenbosch? Is it an Afrikaner stock thing? Is it an education institution thing? Is it the wine? There must be something around here that it produces these extraordinary entrepreneurs.
Well, I think that, all these elements obviously have some impact on it. But I think if you take one step back, you see a very interesting picture emerging as far as the South African business scene today is concerned. The most prominent people, the names you always read about, are 80+% Afrikaans. That is a complete reversal from 30 or 40 years ago, where there were a few Afrikaans business luminaries, but the bulk were English-speaking or Jewish. Today, it's Afrikaans-speaking and black. Now, what is the reason for that? If you go, in my view, it is these people, of which I suppose I'm one, this new wave, is like third generation Afrikaans business people, industrialists. Before the Second World War, the Afrikaans-speaking people were mainly on the agricultural side of the economy. And these people started coming through. They went to good schools, good universities, etc., etc. There's nothing else. There is nothing in the water at Stellenbosch that makes it different.
Family and business, I think, could characterise this office, because it's a business-like office, and yet I look around and there are at least 25, 30 pictures of your lovely family. Are they the two main things in your life?
They are certainly, with family being number one.
So you're not a flashy person. I'm trying to get to the root of what Christo Wiese is, and I'll give you an example. Now, let's say there was a deal that you'd had in your mind for quite a while, and it was your deal.
Yeah.
And people said, no, don't bother with this deal because you can't achieve it anyway. But you went and you hurdled all the barriers, and the deal came off and you made £1 million out of it. It was just you. And there's another deal, and these people walk into your office and they put all your cohorts, they put down a piece of paper on your desk and they say, just sign here, this is $1 billion deal. And it's all done, we've done it. You say, thank you very much. Which would you prefer to do? The money or the deal?
Well, I mean, obviously both are important because, I mean, presumably the object of the deal is money at the end of the day. So they are both important. But the thrill of being involved in putting the deal together, overcoming the obstacles that you refer to, is an important part of it. Today, the way the businesses have developed, I've got colleagues that are a lot smarter than I am, that are totally up to speed with all the regulations and all the laws and all the accounting principles that one has to adhere to these days. So many times they do the bulk of the work. But, you know, overall, when we strategize and we've got to clear the concepts, I'm very much involved.
You mentioned money, and I want to mention money now because you can't ignore that you are the 367th richest man in the world, and there's no man or woman in South Africa that is richer than you. How does that make you feel, first question? And secondly, why do you keep on doing deals? You can't spend that money. You've got 3 children and an extended family, of course, and they can't spend that money. Why more money?
No, but Lindsay, you know, once you go beyond a fairly modest sum of money in South Africa, it becomes marginal. You know the old story, you can only eat 3 meals a day, sleep in 1 bed, etc., etc. So it's not about what the money can buy. Clearly not. Plus, you know, I like to think of myself as a person who is non-flashy. I certainly have a wife who has great problems with any ostentatious display of wealth, and our children grew up that way, and therefore I'm that way inclined anyway, but I suppose at the end of the day it becomes a measure, a yardstick of, you know, whether you've done well or not so well. It's not about, you know, to say, well, you know, I've got so much money. Because the fact of the matter is, most rich people have assets, you know, which is different from having money.
I know what you're saying, and I won't dwell on that too much, apart from saying one thing. I did a piece on philanthropy the other day, and there was Andrew Carnegie, and I can't remember exactly what his quote was, but it was something to do with a man can't be rich unless he enriches others. And people like Warren Buffett, for example, have pledged to give away 85%. And so that is one of the great things about having enormous wealth. That you can still be very wealthy, but give it away. What is your attitude towards that?
No, I, in broad terms, agree with that. I do have a very strong Calvinist streak. I think that, you know, one of the driving forces in my life was I wanted my children to have a better life than perhaps I had, and I had a good life. But, you know, you want better for your children because your standards increase as your experience and your wealth grow. So I have that Calvinist streak, so I'm not really going to land in the camp too quickly that proposes giving everything away. But when you talk about enriching other people's lives, that for me has also been a driver in my business development. We employ as the larger group 300,000 people. Many of those people I started with as a youngster, and I saw them develop as people, and how their families, through their involvement in the business, also had a better life. That is a more important way of enriching people's lives, I believe, than just dishing out money.
Quite right. In fact, when I ever speak to Whitey Basson of Shoprite, one of your colleagues, one of the first things he ever says is, this is how many jobs we've created, and this is the engagement I've had with government. Is that your attitude as well?
Absolutely. You know, you and I spoke earlier on, before we started the interview, about the negative headlines that you always get. When a mine retrenches 10,000 people, it's on the front page of every newspaper. Our group creates more than 12,000 new job opportunities every year. You never read about that.
No, it's very true. We've got to now go through your business and life history. You went to Paul Boys High,
Right.
Stellenbosch,
Right.
degrees, then you studied law at the Cape Bar. You could have taken a safe job. I mean, you really could have done. You could have been a 9 to 5 or an 8 till 6 person, but you decided not to. Why was that?
Well, it was never on the agenda. I never saw myself as the kind of person who'd go to the office at 9 o'clock, go home at 5 and mow the lawn. I mean, that was just not me.
That's the second time you've mentioned lawns, by the way. You sound like a frustrated gardener.
I am, but a really frustrated one because I know nothing about gardening except that it appeals to me when it's beautiful.
Yes.
But no, I suppose, Lindsay, the fact is I grew up in a business home in a small town. My dad had a business and he was a farmer. And eventually my mother had her own business. So there was always this kind of sense of being involved in business. And then, like most things in life, I do believe that there is fate. You know, things happen at a particular time in your life and you see an opportunity, and if your personality is that way inclined, you land where you ultimately find yourself. I have great difficulty with people who suggest that their business development happened in terms of some kind of blueprint. That's nonsense. Nobody has a blueprint. Business is ultimately opportunistic. You're in the arena, an opportunity comes by, and you try to exploit it.
And it's also to do with chance meetings.
Absolutely.
It's not randomness, of course, because you have to be in the right place at the right time to increase your possibility of having that opportunistic business opportunity. But that's the way it works.
Yeah, absolutely the way it works.
We are going to take a break now, and after the break, Christo, we are going to talk about Christo Wiese's development with PEP and Pepkor and Shoprite and Steinhoff and Invicta and Brait and all sorts of other things. So please stay with us. Back. I'm with Christo Wiese in his office in Paro Industrial. We've been talking about more sort of esoteric aspects of his business philosophy. And one thing that Christo said before the break was that there's no blueprint to business success. It's not random either, but certainly it's not all planned and it's not all smooth. So tell me about PEP and your parents, please, Christo.
Right. Now, my dad had a garage in Uppington, and he also had a farm. And across the road from his garage was another garage owned by a friend who, age-wise, was between myself and my dad. And he was very friendly with Renier van Rooyen, who was the founder of PEP and arguably one of South Africa's great entrepreneurs. Started in a little shop, I mean, no bigger than 5 by 10 meters. That's where it all started. Now, he
also
was
in Uppington.
In Uppington. Now, Renier van Rooyen was married to a cousin of mine. So we knew him and we kind of were aware of his little business. But on one particular day, I was at home or home in Uppington on holiday from university. I walked across the road to this friend's garage. And he mentioned to me, he said, you know, this Renier van Rooyen's really beginning to go places because he's now got 3 or 4 shops. I believe he wants to go national and he's looking for investors.
And it was called PEP?
And it was called, no, that time not yet called PEP.
Okay.
And I listened with interest, and that evening I spoke to my dad and I said, you know, we should speak to Renier and find out. And to cut a long story short, my dad sold his businesses and invested in PEP, went on the board. And the arrangement was that when I graduate from university, I would join the business, which is what happened. Now, I told this story to a friend one day. I said, you know, how would my life have developed differently if I had not walked across that road on that particular day, because it was something we were aware of, but we didn't focus on it. He made me focus and made my dad focus, and we took a decision. Now, at the risk of sounding arrogant or conceited, when I told this friend the story, he said, "No, Christo, you the type of guy, you would have walked across another street," which in a sense is true. People who have a certain philosophy, certain approach to life, they walk across streets.
So you're curious.
And they come across opportunities.
You're a curious person.
Yeah.
All the time. Did retail appeal to you at any time before you walked across the street and knew that your father's friend and his rival businessman had a retail operation?
Yeah, it's always been in my family. You know, my father grew up in the really tough years, I mean, the Depression years and so forth.
Yes.
In South Africa, he was born in 1906 and went through the drought and the Depression and all that sort of stuff. But he always had his own little business. And it always had an element of retail. I mean, a garage is just a retail, a motor dealership, just a retail business.
Then after Pep, you invested in your friend's business. It wasn't then called Pep, became called Pep. And then what happened after that?
Well, I mean, it went on a very aggressive expansion phase. I joined the business full-time in 1967.
Were you behind the aggressive expansion phase, or was it your father?
No, it was driven by the founder, by Renier van Rooyen, but with very enthusiastic support from myself.
Yes.
You know, my dad was in those days, somebody at the age of 60 was considered already, you know, retirement age. So my dad was there in the background giving encouragement and support, but really the main driver was the founder and with, as I say, very enthusiastic support from myself.
Then we've got to fast forward a bit now. We could do 3 hours on this story, but let's move on to Shoprite. 1 million rand, that was a lot of money in those days.
It was a lot of money, yeah, a lot of money. The actual purchase price was 2 million rand, but the company had 1 million rand in the bank. Yes. So net, we bought 100%. The purchase price, net, was 1 million rand.
Did you metaphorically walk across the street and see Shoprite? How did it work?
No, it didn't. At that time, when Shoprite was bought, I was practicing law at the Cape Bar because I left for a spell. From about 1973 to 1974 until 1980-81.
Was that a blueprint in order for you to have the skills that you might need in your future career?
No, that wasn't a consideration at all. The reason I went to the bar is to practice at the bar is by that time in South African terms and in my environment, I'd become a wealthy man through the listing of Pep. Yes. On the JSE. My first love, I always thought, was the law. The theatrics and the intellectual stimulation, etc., appealed to me. Plus, I was hoping to get married to my wife, and I don't think the marriage would have worked because I was away from home 20 days a year while I was working for Pep. Yeah. Traveling the country, opening stores, signing leases and so forth. I mean, that's a way to start a marriage. So I thought, well, you know, I've now got enough money. I can now, you know, operate with my friends at the bar, enjoy life, and marry the girl of my dreams. So that was the driver was not preparing myself for a bigger role in business.
So apart from a man who's driven in business and likes retail and walks across streets metaphorically and physically, you're also a romantic and a person that likes theatricals and wanted to go into a job where you dress up and wear wigs and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you speak, you know, very formally. Yes. And you are addressed very formally. And you have all this intellectual stimulation around you all the time.
Okay, Shoprite now. Again, I want to get forward to the Virgin Active and the New Look business with Brait, but get to Shoprite now. That was a phenomenal story, and also OK was involved just after Shoprite.
Yeah, well, you know, Shoprite, when we bought it, I think, owned 6 supermarkets. Renier van Rooyen again had the brilliance to appoint a very young Whitey Besson to run that. Now there again comes the opportunistic element comes into it, because one of the founders of Shoprite was a born trader, a chap called Barney Rogert, who's since passed away. And he and Whitey Besson, in spite of a vast difference in age and in experience and in educational qualifications, because Barney was the sort of guy that left school at the age of 15. Whitey was a fully qualified CA. But the two of them got on like a house on fire, proverbial, and just got this business going. And again, I must take a little bit of credit, with some hesitation, when I became chairman in 1981, which is only 2 years later.
Yes.
Whitey and I were good friends at university and have been very close friends for 50 years. I think, offered a very valuable support base for Whitey to really get going. But ultimately, the credit for the exponential growth of Shoprite belongs to Whitey and his team and Barney Rogert.
Okay, the SA Brewers has been in the SAB Miller has been in the news so much recently. Can you believe that company? 1.4 trillion. What an astonishing story!
Astonishing.
Another great South African success story. But you've got a link to SAB because they used to own OK, and you bought it for R1.
That's correct. Interesting story. When I grew up, the retail scene in South Africa was dominated by the OK Bazaars. I mean, that was like, so far number one that nobody else came close. And you know the history because of exchange control, etc., etc. I mean, SA Breweries got into businesses far removed from their core business, one of which was OK Bazaars. When it was run by Meyer Khan, who subsequently became head of SA Breweries, it was a great business. But when he left, the business declined and it was losing money. Now, if you run the sums, it's quite interesting. SA Brewery was trading, the share was trading, if I remember correctly, at a 20 PE. OK Bazaars was losing 200 million rand a year. Times 20 is 4 billion rand of shareholders' value.
Yes.
That's up in smoke. So, by Meyer Khan selling OK Bazaars to us for R1, and what people always forget, part of the deal was there had to be 1 billion rands worth of net assets. So in truth, we never paid R1, we got R1 billion for buying the business. But it was a brilliant decision on their part, because they took a 200 million rand loss out of the equation.
The rest is history, of course, and we've got to come to recent history because we're running out of time, sadly. Brait. This is one of these situations where the market got it completely wrong. The share price came down enormously after that disposal and all that cash sitting around, people saying, we must punish you because you've got all that cash, and then suddenly Virgin and New Look and goodness knows what else in the future. Yeah. That's a great story. I mean, I can't believe that thing went from 60 or 70 up to 140, 150.
No, but I mean, Lindsay, the true story is that when the new Brait was established in 2011, why do I say the new Brait? Until 2011, Brait was a typical private equity fund manager, managing other people's funds in private equity deals.
Right.
John Nodder, the CEO of Brait, and I got together and we decided that there's a better model, an investment holding company model, where we invest our own capital. We then went on a capital raising exercise. We had a rights issue, which I underwrote, which was very successful. We now had a lot of capital to invest, but our own money, or the company's own money. That share price in 2011 was 16 Rand 50, and in 4 years had increased tenfold.
It was mucking about. I remember when it was in the teens for ages. The future of Brait is obviously linked to a Virgin and New Look, but will this be your vehicle to indulge yourself in things that you might think are a good bet? I know you seem to like the UK at the moment.
Yeah, I think that was, again, by pure chance. Obviously, we as South Africans feel very much at home in the UK.
Yes.
The legal system's the same. We speak the language. We use the same sort of telephone system, and we drive on the same side of the road.
Yes.
So we feel very much at home there, in that environment. So it's natural for us to look at opportunities there, but that wasn't what drove it in this instance. Brait has a very clear set of criteria by which it decides whether to make an investment or not. And those two businesses just happened to tick all the boxes, literally tick them all. So it was a relatively easy decision.
One more question, and it's going to be a very brief answer, if you would. The comments you made to me before we went on air about negativity, you're not a negative person, you don't understand negative people, and you say that the media sometimes projects the negative side. And I said, well, that's because bad news travels fast. Yeah. What happened in London? Speaking about London, at London City Airport with a load of cash, you were found innocent and you were paid interest. But what happened there?
No, it's very simple. You must turn the clock back to what the world looked like in those days. I mean, banks were going bust. We had, one of our group companies had money in one of the one of the highest regarded banks in the world, UBS. One day, my man phoned me and he said, Christo, we've got some money in UBS. I'm going to do something today, which I would have bet my life I will never do. I'm going to withdraw our funds and place it with other banks. I mean, that was, picture that.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, something that I have to say very carefully, and that is that the point I made to you earlier, always look in context.
Yes.
You threw out this number of Forbes, etc.
Yeah.
Although that money may sound to most people like a lot of money, in context, it's suddenly not such a lot of money.
That's what your legal case was. We've got
the lawyers, I said to them, play it down, man. I don't want to, make this point that it's not really money. I had this money, always had it, in London in a safe deposit box. I was moving some of my activities to Luxembourg. I had bank accounts there. I was taking the money from London to Luxembourg after taking advice that it is perfectly legal.
Yeah.
You can move any amount of money in EU countries without answering any question. You are perfectly legal. You can do that. And that's what I was doing.
I've always wondered how on earth you got it all into one suitcase. But Christo, we've run out of time. Thanks very much for letting us into your world.
Lindsay.
Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you.